Hello. Welcome to the Salvation Army's International Women's Day celebration, in which we are having our own panel of experts on the work of the environment and gender equality. This year's theme is Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. Our panelists include Alma Acub from the Philippines, who is working in integrated community development, Margaret Musumbi from Kenya, working with rural communities affected by climate change, and Dr. Helfrid Schulte-Herbruggen from Sweden, an environmental chemist and engineer with a passion for the environment, sustainability, and social justice. Welcome to each of our panelists. We're so glad that you're here today, and welcome to our viewers. We hope that you're able to benefit from what we're going to be sharing today. So, our first question for our panelists: tell us, how have you become involved in gender justice and climate justice? Who's influenced you? Alma?
Hi, good evening from the Philippines. I was involved in community development and I'm a public health practitioner. So basically, my exposure to the damages in the environment affected me greatly. And hearing stories that affected the physical health of individuals also is affecting the environment as well as the individual. My view is that it helps as a woman to be part of this um, preventive activities so that we can address the issue.
Thank you, Alma. Helfrid, we'd like to hear from you. How have you become involved in gender justice and climate justice? Who has influenced you?
Thank you so much. From an early age, I became interested in the environment. At some point as a child, I think it was through Scouts, I understood that not all people in the world have access to clean water. I grew up in the 90s and we learned of global warming, of overfishing of the seas, the holes in the ozone layer, and I was shocked by the treatment of animals as they were transported across Europe on their way to slaughter. In order to be able to work with these problems that I saw, I decided to study environmental chemistry, learn more about pollution, but also how to stop it. And I focused on a PhD in environmental engineering in order to work with water purification and understand more about the technologies that we can use to clean water for drinking.
Thank you, Helfrid. Why should people care about the environment? Alma, what are your thoughts?
I think the question is definitely very important because currently the condition of the world affected by climate changes require everyone's action. And based on the global scenario, 51% of humanity is comprised of women and girls. And this is critically important that we as women should be addressing the concern. And as you see from this graphs, in the past decade was the hottest on the record, and globally forest areas continue to decline. And lastly, there is a strong need for us to take action because of the dreaded disease and natural calamities have caused damage in properties and human lives are affected. So basically that is my answer.
Thank you, Alma. Helfrid, what are some of your thoughts on why we should care about the environment?
Why should we care about our environment? Well, putting it simply, the environment is our home, this planet is our home. And the resources we use, they are not infinite. The water, the forest, the animals. If everyone lived, for instance, as a Swedish person, we would need nearly 4 planets if we would consume the same amount of everyone would consume the same amount of resources. And as a way to visualize and to calculate on a global level how humanity is using our planet, scientists have developed a framework called the planetary boundaries. We have already crossed 4 of these boundaries, which are climate change, biodiversity loss, land system change, so this might be deforestation or the way we use the land around us, and also biochemical flows, which is largely to do with phosphorus and nitrogen, which leads to eutrophication and death of the fishes in the sea when there's not enough oxygen. In my work, I focus on freshwater use. As you can see, this boundary has not been crossed on a global level, but we are all very much aware that locally this might look very differently.
Thank you, Helfrid. In your experience, what are some examples of women and girls leading the charge on climate change adaptation, building a more sustainable future for all? Helfrid, do you have thoughts on that? Examples of women and girls leading the charge on climate change adaptation, building a more sustainable future for all.
Thank you. A very important framework has been developed by Kate Raworth called the Oxfam Donut. This framework illustrates how the social foundation is essential in order to achieve both a safe and just space for humanity in which to live, and how we have to ensure the social aspects of life, which are gender equality and peace, which we are talking about today. And but we cannot exceed the planet's boundaries in this. On a global level, the situation is very different, and in Leeds University they have calculated again with on a national level how this looks. And we can see that in the West we have a lot of work to do because we are exceeding the planetary boundaries, whereas many other countries in Asia or in Africa, a lot of work is needed to ensure the social foundations. But at the end of the day, we all work in our local level and within our circle of influences. And I can give you some examples of what we are doing in Sweden. And in Sweden, actually 1 million people depend on wells and boreholes for their drinking water supply. These boreholes, they are sensitive to drought and to the climate change that we are seeing more and more. And we are working with awareness of and knowledge of what needs to be done with these water supplies. We work with municipalities to assemble information and to spread knowledge on how to handle this. We also are working with municipal water supplies in the areas of water conservation. There's a lot of campaigning that needs to be done, awareness that water is not infinite, even in Sweden where we have access to so much. But we also develop strategies of how to change attitudes and how people are using water. And we are also developing very hands-on examples of simple technologies that can be used to reduce the water consumption.
Thank you, Helfrid. Alma, we'd like to hear from you. In your experience, what are some examples of women and girls leading the charge on climate change adaptation, building a more sustainable future for all?
Thank you, Janet. I have a video here that I wanted to share about the Philippine experiences. So let's watch.
Ganyan ang tunog ng bagyong Odette. Dito ako sa loob ng kwarto. At saka baha na rin dito. O baha na. Pang tatlong lamas ko na ito. Basa na siya. Dito, pumasok na sa loob ng kwarto ang tubig mula dito sa bintana namin. Yan po ang tunog ng bagyong Odette. Parang pusa. Nagalit na galit. Siya na mas lakas. Yan, mga tunog ay mula sa aming buko. At dito na rin, bahang-baha na rin dito. At ako ay tayo patuloy na naglalamas. Dito, nasa second floor na kami. Pero baha pa rin dito ang loob ng kwarto. Dito sa DHQ. Dito po yun sa DHQ ng Visayas Island Division. Po ako sa aming kwarto. At the same time, naglalamas po ako. Yan, pangalawang timba ko na yan sa tubig na pumasok dito po sa loob. Update sa ngayon, guys. Thank you for your prayers. Ito po yung kalagayan ng mga bahay ko dito. Gawin ko bayanihan. Po yung daan pagka sa mga bahay na wala ka ganyan po nangyari sa mga bahay.
Thank you, Alma. Margaret, we'd love to hear from you about some examples of women and girls leading the charge on climate change adaptation, as well as how can we participate? What needs to happen to address climate and gender justice from your perspective?
Thank you very much. Some of the champions that I have met who have been doing good justice to the environment are young girls and women. And one example that is Caroline in slide number 8, 9, and 10. Caroline has been working with her twin sister to champion for tree planting in her community. She is the chair lady for a big group of young people whom she mobilizes for tree planting, where they plant trees at the in the forests, where forests have been cut, at the water sources, so that they can protect the water sources. She also mobilizes youth and young girls to plant trees in schools, in health centers, and in other public places in the county. The Salvation Army, under the project that I work for, are very happy to work with girls like Caroline in order to support her. So one thing that Caroline has been doing in conjunction with the project is that she's been mobilizing communities to do conversations around tree planting. And also, what needs to happen so that we can address climate change is that people need to really plant trees. People need to practice farming practices that are that will conserve the environment. For example, one of the practices that we have been introducing to our communities is farming God's way. Farming God's way is a practice that helps the farmers not to disrupt the soil, but to keep the soil intact so that it is not blown away by the wind, so that it is not washed away by water when it rains. And if you refer to slide number 11, 12, and 13, you will see that there is the farming God's way practices that we have been introducing to our farmers. Indeed, you will find that women have really taken up this practice. When I was in Uganda last week, that is what we were doing with women in the villages, and they have started to use these conservation methods so that they can conserve the environment, including planting of trees and using less and less of the pesticides, using less and less of chemicals that are usually released to the atmosphere that spoil the environment and the air that we breathe. Lastly, we have been introducing these fireless cookers. Fireless cooker is actually just a basket that has been made and lined with black. So when you pre-cook your food like rice, you boil. When it comes to boil, you put in here and cover, and then you cover with this cushioned lid. In so doing, it will continue just to cook there. Then you will be able to save a lot of firewood. The benefits for fireless cooker is that families will use less firewood, they will spend less in buying charcoal, and it will improve the safety of women and children who are usually going out to gather firewood, and also it will reduce deforestation, and we will have more vegetation cover, and we will have more forests, and of course the forests also help our environment to be clean and clean. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Margaret. Fascinating. Great examples from your contexts. Alma, we'd love to hear from you. What needs to happen to address the needs for climate and gender justice? How can we participate?
I have an acronym here. It's I acronym it as an ACT. So letter A means acknowledge the problem. It's important that we also focus on the issues And then, of course, we have letter C, which is community mobilization. Community needs to take part and act upon the issue. And letter T, we should train people on technology and innovative ways to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. Another question for our panelists. What would you say to the Salvation Army to help us become a more sustainable organization environmentally? We'd love to hear from you as a movement. Helfrid?
Thank you, Janet, for this question. And it's very interesting and a challenge, I think. But a few areas where the Salvation Army could look into becoming more sustainable are where do the corps or the organization gain its electricity supply or energy supply? Are we using renewable energies where we are able? Where are the savings put in what kind of banks, or the pensions, where the pension funds that are held? Where is this money being invested? And these could have large impacts that maybe are not visible to the individual, but can have a large effect.
Excellent. Thank you, Helfrid. Alma?
I think one of the key strengths of the Salvation Army is that we are already in the communities, and that education in the community is a critical role here in terms of how we can make use of the current resources that we have, and how we prevent the environment from destruction by simple means of preventive activities that will address the protection of our air, land, and water. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Alma. Thank you both. One final word. Would any of our panelists like to share one final word from your heart, from your mind, from your experience, your perspective with our webinar viewers as we conclude our time celebrating International Women's Day and the intersection of gender justice and climate justice? One final word. Alma?
We live in a different world now, and when we do not step up, our next generation will no longer enjoy the beauty of our planet. I hope that this forum can start small steps to protecting our environment and upscale what we are currently doing and be more inclusive regardless of gender. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Alma. Helfrid?
What I love about being part of the Salvation Army is that we become closer. We have brothers and sisters on the other side of the planet, and we can have an understanding for each other. And we all have a responsibility for each other, for the environment, for our neighbor who might be quite far away, but on who we have an impact in our choices with our consumption. And we also have a responsibility for future generations. We are also all on a journey, and we are part of something bigger. I had the opportunity to pursue higher education, which my grandmother did not have because she was a girl. I have had youth leaders, mentors, and scholars that have taught me and trodden a path that I can follow. And I would like to encourage us all to pursue equality, democracy, the care for the environment. These are all fragile, and we have to continue to work for these in our daily lives, in our workplaces, in our community groups, in school, in our political groups. And we have to raise our children and help them to work for these things.
One final question for you, Margaret. What's one last word, anything from your heart or mind or your experience, your perspective that you'd like to share with our viewers on this webinar. We'd love to hear you.
Thank you very much, Janet. Uh, Finally, I would just want to encourage governments, organizations that are on the ground, that they need to really recognize the contribution that women are doing on the ground, and other people, of course. And these women and girls need to be supported so that they can continue with the response, as I had given there an example of Caroline. This will be empowering the woman, at the same time countering the changes brought by climate change. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they urge countries to mitigate climate change under global goal number 14, and they promote gender equality under global goal number 5. Finally, let us be reminded that in Galatians 3:28, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists for your valuable contributions to this webinar on International Women's Day with the Salvation Army. But even beyond this webinar, I just want to express thanks and honor, really, to our panelists for your lives that are given to such important issues in the world, your competency, your energies, your devotion, your investment in such things. The world is a better place because of you. And as a female salvationist myself, I feel honored, proud of you, honored to be part of this with you. And thank you for honoring us with your investment in our webinar today on International Women's Day. Lord bless you. Thanks.